A Fast Ship. Posted by u/WritingDracon over on r/HFY. Hirkan huffed in annoyance. Their charge was a representative from the Girish Hermogeny, known for his, to borrow a human term, tendency to be Scrooges on everything. He sought out the cheapest, fastest ship that were remotely reputable for transport, foregoing buying their own, despite having the money for it, simply saying they didn't want to pay for the crew. Their own ship would have been better given the current situation, hunkered down, cloaked as their daughter hissed expletives at their sire for their stupidity, as they avoided the prowling mercenaries. Near the docks sat a human, clothed in a heavy, old, well-loved and maintained pressure suit, his helmet retracted, revealing his younger age. Thrall, the suit looked older than he was. Hirkan and company, the human said quietly, noting how the tree had sided up and avoided as many looks as they could. I am, and this is Lord Brisbane. Word travels fast, the young human said with a grin, tilting his head. Inside, we'll talk more there, he said, jerking his head as he went back to how he had been, tipping back a creamy brew, the scent of caffeine making Hirkan's body twitch, wanting some of that heady, wonderful brew, but deciding it would be best to drink later. The three clambered aboard and learned quickly why the trip was so cheap. The ship was small, little more than a cockpit, kitchenette, all in one room, and a separated engineering bay. Brisbane's daughter huffed as she yanked her hood down, revealing her helmeted, almost alligator-like head, her central eye still glaring at her sire as her helmet retracted into the back of her suit. Cramped, but comfortable, she sighed, the lilt in her voice tired as she poked at one of the guest beds, already secured to the floor, including crash webbing. There were two bolted down and a chair attached to the comm console near the kitchenette, with crash webbing, which struck Hirkan as odd. Why did every bed, chair have crash webbing? Sorry for the lack of seating. I'm a data runner. I don't normally run passengers, the young captain said, popping up behind them, the sound of a sealing airlock heard through the small vessel. Welcome aboard. Now, the destination is the Flower of Light, you said. He said, his arms folded, staring at them, as they heard the coffee maker kicking in, a carafe filling with dark, soul-saving liquid, making Hirkan twitch again. The human spotted a twitch. He set down 3 metallic mugs after removing them from a mag-locking cabinet, letting them get the bitter brew, even as Brisbane nodded. You presume correctly, Captain. As swift as possible, if you could. He rumbled before grimacing, setting several rectangular credit chips on the table. With a little extra, if you can manage it before she leaves the system. Hirkan stifled a smile as he slowly tipped back his mug. Hopefully, young Dorea's lessons on generosity helped. I'll see what I can do. She is a capital class, but the Saturn's got her own tricks. Best finish those quickly, or put a lid on them and lock them down, the captain said, an amused glint flashing in his eyes as he motioned to the crash webbing. Hirkan, mind joining me in the cockpit? Chances are the light is going to need clearance codes, and I would rather not ruin the RCS clusters, he said, muttering, again, under his breath. With a sigh, Hirkan nodded, tipping back the hot brew, letting it warm his lethargic, aging body, before clambering into the co-pilot chair, next to the pilot's chair, letting his gaze dance around the cockpit. It was small but relatively roomy, likely due to the captain's bulky suit. And speaking of whom, the captain clambered into his own seat, cheeks full of what was likely the remainder of a nutrition bar, before he quickly swallowed, thickly. "Sorry, I wasn't expecting to get this job." "I'm sorry, I wasn't expecting to get a job this quickly," he apologized, getting a snort out of Hirkan, reminding him of his old squad mates trying to finish their meal when an alarm had gone off. Shaking himself from his musings, he watched as the human rapidly began pre-flight checks, while calling the traffic control tower. "Breaker, breaker, this is Saturn V to control. IFF code, Sierra Oscar, November 1, Charlie, prepping for launch. Flight computer transmitting flight path now," he said, listening to the returning chatter as the flight computer glowed and the ship rumbled like a beast waking from its sleep. Oddly loud for such a small vessel. "Saturn V, this is control. That's a negative on that launch," the comms crackled, making the human frown at the Vox unit. "Scanners showing we have a Hyena vessel sitting right outside the launch bay. Weapons hot. Unless you've got a good-sized gun on that rowboat, we can't allow you to take off." Hirkan cursed softly, sitting back, even as the human fiddled with something. "Control, this is Saturn. Sending amended flight path, amended takeoff routine and engine design now. Requesting permission to bust the tower and habitation sections," he said, even as he began to open red hatches on his console and began flipping them up. With every switch he flipped, the rumbling got louder and louder. "Saturn V, this is Control. Permission granted. Arranging launch bay for hot launch. Cameras prepped and rolling," the comms crackled, getting Hirkan's attention. A drop of dread filling his upper stomach. What did... "Roger that one, Control. Pity we can't see their faces. Keep comms open on wide. We should at least hear them," the captain replied with a grin, even as he reached for other systems, slowly pushing a set of levers to the top, and then flicked off the shields, before reaching for a long lever next to his seat that sat in the up position. Not unlike an old ground-bound automobile handbrake. The shield was very, very telling. First, it meant either A, they were screwed and they picked up a ship about to turn them in, unlikely given the conversation earlier. The other... Hirkan quickly grabbed the crash webbing, slamming it down over himself in a panic. "My lord, madame, I would advise you to secure yourselves, quickly," he barked out, his main eye focused ahead, his third eye focused on the pilot with dread and anticipation. The human grinned as he heard a confused guttural language from behind them. "Launch in 3, came the countdown from Control, as the doors before them opened up, all but the last one. The sound of scaffolding releasing the vessel into 0G, and then a faint hum of pumps removing air. 2. Armor paneling moved up behind them, visible only to the rear cameras, scorched and well used. The other arms locking it in place, even as the ship seemed to rumble louder with each passing moment. "Steady, girl, steady," the human muttered under his breath, hands tightening on the lever, thumb pressing down the button at the tip. 1. Launch, the STC controller said, as the outer doors opened up like an iris, and the captain slammed the lever down, and the ship roared forward. Hirkan was thrown back into his chair as the engines snarled to life, barely making out the startled yelps and cursing behind them. the engine audible thanks to the engine room as it propelled the small ship forward like a missile. Atomic fire actually licking up past the cockpit for a moment before they cleared the station at blistering speeds, zipping past the large cruiser sitting outside. He was thrown again as the human yanked the lever up, shutting the engine off, and then yanked the control yoke sideways, the ship snarling as their RCS thrusters burned, spinning the ship 180 degrees, turning to face the startled Knoll vessel. Several fighters spinning around to see what was launched. Hirkan cursed loudly as he was thrown back again, slammed into the chair, saved only by his helmet and the wonderful cushion of the chair. The human slammed the ignition lever down again, and so the vessel howled again. The engine once more shook the ship like a craven trap, slowing them down, and then racing forward again, zipping between fighters, skimming past the surface of the Knoll cruiser, and then rocketing past control's viewports, even as vicious curses were spat out over the Vox at their speed. "What the feck?" came the controller's voice as the little vessel sped along the station towards the slowly rotating habitat ring. "Come on, girl, a little faster, I know you've got it in you," the human mumbled, even as he pushed the acceleration levers as far as they could go, the ship snarling as they got closer and closer. Red lights zipped past on either side as the Knolls tried to shoot them down with fighters, the projectiles splashing off the station's shields just past them. Fighters trying to close the distance, but they only fell farther and farther behind, just as they zipped between the support beams of the habitat ring, now facing the black void of space with no targets other than them. Saturn V to control, clearing station, attempting to get safe distance to engage skipper drive, the human grunted out, pressed against his seat, not shutting off the main engine. Hirkan understood why, unfortunately, but still itched to turn the shields back up, feeling naked with only the deflectors on, keeping micrometeors from turning them into a hole-filled slag pile. But he knew he couldn't. They were literally going too fast for a shield generator that would fit on the ship size to keep up. They would fly their own shields. "Saturn V, you're cleared to jump when ready. Thanks for one hell of a show," came the STC's controller. Mild whooping in the background could be heard. "Just a heads up, Knoll ships trying to give chase." "They can try. Commencing skip in 3, 2, 1, the human said, and slammed the lever back up, the main engine shutting off and slamming his hands on a button in the center of his console. White filled their vision, accompanied by a low purring of something. Aboard the Flower of Light, the command crew were focused on their tasks, listening out for any ships dropping in, the captain standing at a viewport, nervously flicking their tail. "Captain, skip signature detected. Sweet Krell!" The sensor officer shrieked, a distant flash of light seen through the viewport. "They dropped out at 2,300 kilometers a second. Are they? Additional contacts, light Knoll cruiser, right on top of them," the officer said, as the Flower slowly turned to face the light. "On screen sensors. Weapons on standby. Target locks on the Knolls," the Gurish said firmly, as the image flicked on screen, revealing what amounted to a small habitat module and cockpit, bolted onto an engine twice the size of her habitable section, shaped like an old Convair-class shuttle, but that hadn't ditched her lower stage. Her main engine bathed whatever was behind her in nuclear fire. a white plume of her propulsion exhaust, pushing her forward at a startling rate, racing towards the flower like her life depended on it. 200, 2,500, 3,000, and still climbing, came the shaken whisper, as the ship didn't attempt to slow down. Sir, Vox channel open with the ship. Code confirmed. Lars Brisbane is on board. The Vox officer yelled, as the tiny human vessel kept accelerating, then shutting its main engine off, her RCS engines glowing brightly, spinning 180 degrees, her single massive engine aimed at them before it ignited. She was slowing down, adjusting her vector to align with the hangar. All cannons, knock those gnolls into the void. I want medical down to the hangar now. The Flower's captain roared, one claw pointed at the gnoll vessel, even as the more engine-than ship vessel slowed down next to them, now out of the captain's sight. Though now he had more pressing issues, as the vessel rocked, her main batteries opening up with a vicious salvo, rocking the Gnoll cruiser, making it bring its attention up to the larger capital ship. Hirkan groaned as he felt the ship comparatively gently strafe sideways, feeling as she shuddered, long underused landing gear extending out with a soft shake as she landed, purring like an overgrown feline that had gotten a forbidden treat. That was a experience, he said, desperately trying not to be too ill, even as the human laughed. Not the craziest stunt I've pulled. Just be glad we landed in one piece. Last time I burnt out every RCS cluster I had trying to outmaneuver a rogue nanite assembly, the young captain said, grinning a little, even as he clambered out. Was a hell of a lot of fun though, he said, as Hirkan slowly pulled himself out of the crash webbing. In the back, the Lord was stuck to the bed in crash webbing, his helmet up. His visor now completely covered in something. I am never flying on a human vessel again, his daughter roared, her head resting on the console before her, stuck in the crash webbing. Coffee splattered all over her general vicinity, an empty, uncovered mug next to her. The hatch opened, and Hirkan smiled as the medics sprinted in, collected up the Lord and his daughter, who both got up, shakily. Later, as he and the human rode the elevator, heading to the bridge, he looked down through the window to see the Saturn. He balked, seeing at last what they had been flying on. What? I thought you knew she was an old conveyor, the human said, seeing what his reaction was, grinning a little. Nothing faster than the old gal, for her class, he said with a lopsided grin. Hirkan stared at the human and then sighed, staring at the innocently sitting vessel till the elevator finally passed through the ceiling heading to the bridge.